Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Unit 2 of Myth and Culture, the online course. As before, I'm your instructor, Dr. Michael Zimmerman, and today we're going to be doing a short video lecture on creation myth. When dealing with creation myths, we like to use the term cosmogony. Cosmogony is an ancient Greek term which literally means the birth of order. It's any theory, idea, or in this case myth, concerning the coming into existence or origin of the universe, how reality came to be. This can be the creation of anything, the creation of gods, the creation of the earth, of mountains, lakes, rivers, the sky, the stars, sun, moon, really the creation of absolutely anything. When talking about the creation of the entire universe, however, it's important to note two important Greek terms. In creation myths, order, or cosmos, as the Greeks called it, is often created out of chaos, the state of the universe before creation. This is often represented in creation myths as a great void or a vast empty sea. For example, in the myth of the book of Genesis from the Bible, it is said that God moves over the surfaces of the water, and it is in that moment that he separates the light from the dark and begins the process of creation that takes 7 days. In the Norse myth of the Eddas, there are two great lands, the cold Niflheim to the north and the warm Muspel to the south. In the middle lies a great big empty void called Ginnungagap, and it is in this void called Ginnungagap that the world is created. There are many examples of both chaos and cosmos found throughout creation myths. Now, it's important to note that order refers not just to the organizing principles of the physical universe, the creation of natural phenomena such as the sun, the moon, the stars, the mountains, the lakes, the rivers, the oceans, etc., but also the basic socio-political, cultural, and spiritual truths of existence that affect human beings, at least according to individual mythologies. What do I mean by this? Well, for example, in the Greek myth of the Theogony, the first two beings in creation are Gaia, the earth, and Uranos, the sky. It is through the coupling of Gaia and Uranos, earth and sky, that all the elements of the natural world are created. The sun, Phoebus, the moon, Phoebe, Pontos, the sea, ocean, the ocean, and many others. Now, in addition to this physical ordering of the universe, creation myths also deal with socio-political, religious, and cultural elements as well. For example, in the myth of Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden from the Bible, here we have a creation myth where not only does God create the world in 7 days, but also we have a socio-political and religious ordering as well. God is the ultimate authority and must be obeyed, or you will be exiled for your sins. It establishes concepts such as original sin, the controlling aspect of man over nature, and the dominance of man over woman, at least according to the myth. Now, your textbook, Myth and Knowing, describes 9 different types of creation myths. The first of these are called accretion and conjunction stories. In the first of these creation myths, accretion and conjunction stories, the universe is created from the process of accretion, where something gradually increases by the steady addition of smaller parts. An example may be found in the Eddas from Norse mythology. In this story, the cold ice from Niflheim meets the warm air from Muspel to the south. When the two meet, the ice begins to thaw and drip. Over centuries, those thawing drips take the form of an evil frost giant named Ymir, and this frost giant became the first being in creation, according to Norse mythology. This also includes things created from conjunction, the act of one or more things being joined together. For example, in Tibetan mythology, we have the story of Dorje Gyatram, the story of how the world was created through the combination of the 4 elements: earth, air, wind, and fire. In this category of creation myth, we also see things that are created from a gradual unconscious process, but also from accident or happenstance. For example, in one Native American myth, Coyote, the Native American trickster god, sees a pouch on God's belt, and being a trickster and a thief, decides to steal it. As he's running away with this pouch, he trips over the root of a tree, scattering the pouch's contents across the sky. However, it was not jewels inside the belt, but rather the stars. And this is an explanation as to how the stars became randomly scattered across the sky. The next type of creation myth we see is called a secretion story. In this type of creation myths, things are created through divine emissions, that is to say, bodily fluids from some sort of god or other being. These include vomit, sweat, urine, feces, semen, or any number of other bodily fluids. For example, among the Chukchi people of eastern Siberia, they believe that Kuurkil, the great raven, flew over the surface of the earth at the dawn of time. And as this raven flew over the surface of the earth, he did what all birds do, especially over my car. That's right. This bird urinated and defecated. His urine became the oceans and the lakes and the rivers of the world, and his feces became the mountains, rocks, soil, and landforms of the world. During the Amarna period in ancient Egypt, they believed that Aten, the great sun god, created all of the other gods as well as all parts of the earth through the act of masturbation. This is an example of secretion because, of course, semen would be an example of a bodily fluid. Another example is found in Greek mythology and involves the birth of Aphrodite, the goddess of love, beauty, and reproduction. In this story, Ouranos, who had treated his children, the Titans, poorly, was tricked by Gaia and Ouranos' son Kronos, and castrated by Kronos. As Kronos swung his sickle and castrated his father's penis fell into the ocean behind him, where it became mixed with the sea foam and created the goddess Aphrodite. While this is an example of secretion, it is also an example of something called parthenogenesis. Parthenogenesis, or virgin birth, refers to procreation or reproduction without sexual intercourse. The creation of Aphrodite is an example of this. Can you think of another example? Well, how about the birth of Jesus from the Virgin Mary in the Bible? That is a great example of parthenogenesis. Our next creation myth type is similar to secretion and yet distinct from it. In this type of creation myth, things are created through an act of sacrifice. Usually a god is sacrificed in order for the act of creation to succeed. The reason why this could be seen as a subset of the secretion myth is that things are usually created from the body of the deceased god, as well as from the act of sacrifice itself. For example, in Chinese mythology, Pan Ku was a giant, a being created at the start of the earth. As Pan Ku grew, he became larger and larger and larger until when he finally died, he was the size of the earth itself. As his body decomposed, his various body parts became the different parts of the world. His hair became the grasses and trees and vegetation. His bones became the rocks and boulders and mountains, and his great bald head became the sky. In Aztec mythology, the gods Nanautzin and Tecucuztlatl threw each other into a furnace in order to create the sun and moon. And in Babylonian mythology, the god Marduk killed the god Tiamat, as well as a series of other gods, and used their blood to create human beings. This is also seen in the example of the Eddas as well. Do you remember that frost giant Ymir? Well, the gods, Odin, Vili, and Ve, slew him and used his body to create the world as well. This is yet another example of a sacrifice story. Our next type of creation myth is called a division or consummation story. In these creation myths, creation results either from the emergence of something from a cosmogenic egg, that is a tiny object with the potential for organized growth, or from the consummation of a marriage between two primordial deities, such as the earth and the sky. There are many examples of division and conjugation, or consummation as it's also called, in world mythology. One such example from Hindu mythology states that Brahma, the creator god of Hindu mythology, was hatched out of an egg at the start of the world. In the Finnish epic, the Kalevala, the virgin daughter of Air, whose life of virgin solitude becomes so burdensome to her that she eventually sinks into the sea, becomes pregnant from the sea, and rolls with the enormous billows of the primordial ocean for 700 years. Finally, she calls out to the highest of the gods for help. In answer, a beautiful bird appears, flying low over the water, searching for a place to land. Alighting upon the water mother's knee, Air Daughter's new name, this bird lays 6 golden eggs and another of iron. As she broods over them, the heat becomes so fierce that the water mother moves her knee, causing the eggs to fall and split open, creating the earth, sky, sun, moon, and clouds. Now again, this also includes the consummation of a marriage between two primordial deities, such as earth or sky, meaning, of course, procreation from the act of sex. In the case of Greek mythology, Ouranos, the sky, lay on top of Gaia, the earth, and through their copulation created all of the different natural elements of the world. Our fifth creation myth type is the Earth Diver story. Both Earth Diver stories and our following type, emergent stories, are most commonly found in Native American mythology. In creation myths from the Earth Diver category, a supreme being sends an animal, usually a bird or amphibian, into the primordial waters of chaos to find the material with which to build habitable land. This animal is called the Earth Diver. Examples from Native American mythology include Iroquois or Haudenosaunee mythology, which states that Sky Woman, the primordial creator, sent a beaver down into the depths of the sea to bring back the thing that she needed to begin the process of creating the world. Similar stories are also found in Nanai mythology from the native peoples of Siberia and among the Maidu people of America as well. Also common in Native American mythology, especially in the American Southwest, are emergent stories. Creation myths from this category describe creation as an evolutionary process. The universe, first gods, first person, or first people slowly emerge from an original cramped womb, or world, into this world. This often represents an emergence from early society into modern civilization. Examples are found in Hopi and Zuni mythology of the Southwest, and Navajo creation myths as well. In the earlier story of Sky Woman, in which she sends a beaver down under the primordial ocean to bring back what she needs to create the world, Sky Woman herself first emerges into the world out of the bottom of a tree of another world. This itself is also an example of emergence. Our next creation myth type is called the two-creator story. This is a type of myth in which things are created either through the cooperation or competition of two gods. This myth is particularly common in African and Native American mythologies. This creation myth frequently also distinguishes and legitimizes hierarchies between gods, men, or animals. What might be some examples of two-creator stories? In Mayan mythology, two gods, Tepeu and Gukumats, work together to create a race of beings who can worship them, otherwise known as humans. Another example of a two-creator myth comes from Africa and the Basonge tribe. This tribe tells the story of the rivalry of two creator gods, Colombo Mwifangi and Mwile. The latter god was the highest of the divine tribe, and became angry that people kept talking about Colombo, who claimed to have made himself. Mwile sends for this upstart and challenges him to prove his claims through a series of tests. This is, of course, an example of not cooperation, like Tepeo and Gukumats, but of competition between these two gods. In the first test, Mwile takes dust and spits into it, creating clay from which he fashions a living human being. "Do that," the high god taunts, but Colombo is up to the challenge, duplicating Mwile's effort. "Make yours speak," demands Mwile. Colombo at first refuses, and the two quarrel. Finally, after Mwile makes his clay man speak, Colombo also makes the attempt, but his man can only move his lips, lacking the power of articulate speech. But humiliating his rival is not enough for Mwile. Rather, he challenges Colombo to go into a hut and allow Mwile to burn it down around him. "If you survive this trial," Mwile says, "I will acknowledge that you, Colombo, have made yourself." Colombo entered the hut with his animals. Once he is hidden from view, he directs two of the animals to dig a tunnel back to their village, and he tells a bird to lay some eggs on the floor of the hut. Meanwhile, Mwile sets fire to the hut, hearing the eggs exploding in the inferno, and congratulating himself at the thought of putting an end to the pretender Colombo. But by the time Mwile discovers the charred eggshells among the ashes, Colombo is safely back in his own village, and there the story ends. So these clay men that are created by Colombo, Mwifangi, and Mwile were the first human beings. This is actually a combination of three different types of creator myths. Because human beings are created from competition between these two gods, it is a two-creator story. Because Mwile and Colombo spit into the dust to create the clay with which to mold human beings into existence, it is also a secretion myth. And because they molded human beings from clay, it is also our next creation myth type as well. Deus Faber story. This category of myth presents a single creator, the Deus Faber or creator god, the quintessential architect, artisan, or craftsperson. He is also sometimes called a demiurge. This creation myth type involves the creation of one thing from another. Examples include the story of Pygmalion and Galatea from Greek myth, or the myth of Colombo and Mwile from the Basonge tribe, which I just mentioned. Other examples may include the Dogon myth of Amma the creator, rolling the pellets of clay and flinging them into the sky, thus creating the stars, or of God creating Adam from the dust of the ground and Eve from Adam's rib. All of these are examples of Deus Faber stories, because they involve a Deus Faber or creator god building one thing out of another. Our last creation myth type is called the ex nihilo story, in which something is created literally out of nothing, through the act of words, sounds, thoughts, gestures, or dance. A god speaks or thinks, and things form and are organized according to that god's will. The emphasis here is apparently on the speech act, or naming things, and non-physical creation. For example, in the book of Genesis, on his 7 days, God speaks things into existence, and thus they exist. God said, "Let there be light," and thus there was light. This is an example of ex nihilo. In another example from Egyptian mythology, the god Ptah formed and named all things. He would say crocodile, and lo and behold, there was a crocodile. He would say hippopotamus, and lo and behold, there was a hippopotamus. There are many examples of ex nihilo stories throughout world mythology. Your next task will be to create one 1,000-word essay based on one and only one of the 5 following myths, which are in Chapter 2 of your book, Myth and Knowing: An Introduction to World Mythology by Leonard and McClure. These are as follows. Amma and Numo prepared the world from the Dogon people of West Africa. The creation from the Eddas, from Norse or Viking mythology. The Theogony, from Greek mythology. Out of the Blue or the Sky Woman from Iroquois mythology, or the creation from the book of Genesis, this myth, this particular myth being important to Jewish, Christian, and Muslim mythology. Now, no matter which you choose, you will be asked to construct a 1,000-word essay on that myth, which at least partially answers the following questions. What are the different types of creation myths according to this video lecture found in the story, and how are they applied? For example, in the story of Sky Woman, we have a woman emerging out of a hole in her world and coming into ours. Thus, it is an example of an emergence myth. She also sends the beaver down into the sea to bring back something with which she can create the earth. Thus, it is also an earth diver myth. You will want to read the myth carefully to see how each of these are applied. The second question I wish you to answer is to tell me what different elements of the natural world or natural phenomena are created in the story and how. How does this creation myth create, for example, the sun, the moon, stars, the mountains, oceans, clouds, people, animals, or any number of other things? Your third question goes to something that I spoke of at the beginning of this lecture, which is that these creation myths involve not just the creation of a physical ordering of the universe, but also a cultural ordering of the universe. So, what does the story tell us about the cultural beliefs and practices of the culture from which it originates? For example, in the myth of from Dogon mythology of Amma Numa Prepare the World, there is a certain ritual circumcision which is common in Dogon culture, and this is expressed clearly in the myth. We also have, for example, the creation of original sin in the myth of Adam and Eve from the book of Genesis. So ask yourself this question: what can we learn about this culture from this myth? Well, this is the end of the video lecture, and I thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them on the forum for this unit at any time. I will be checking the fora and checking the Blackboard page regularly throughout this unit. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you at Unit 3.